6:43.
All right. Now let's call the meeting to order now that you can all hear me.
So what'd you say about the Green Valleys?
Yes, so back to the agenda. Item one, we had number of months ago, had Green Valleys come and do some water quality testing in some of the streams in North Coventry. And we hadn't heard any results from that. I've reached out to the folks at Green Valleys and corresponded with them. And they've collected all of the data. They have it almost ready to share with us. They're still working on overlaying the water quality data with GIS coordinates to give a full context of where, in fact, they sampled. And Mike Bullard from Green Valleys, he's the one who actually did the testing, indicated that he would have the final results to us by the end of this month. As soon as I receive those, I'll share them with everyone on this call, and then hopefully we can discuss. And we may even want to invite Mike to one of our meetings to have him present, just to give a full flavor and context of what they learned from their testing.
Absolutely, that's the main purpose of it.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
finding out exactly, if there was an application, not that we're proposing one, but an application for a higher quality or at least a high quality stream or something,
right.
that'd be all right. And maybe even confirming that the Fernbrook Pigeon Creek is still high quality.
Right. Yep. So that's where we are with the water testing.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Chris. Thanks for the reminder to track them down. The next thing on the agenda was kind of where are we with the native plant list and that exercise. There was a subgroup of us, I don't know, the native plant subcommittee or something, I guess, that on June 1st we had met and gone through a workshop. So it was myself with Phoebe and with Jesse. And we made actually really good progress, identified a number of things that we need to, I think, find out some more about, do a little more research, and then I think the next step. So Phoebe, I know you had updated the list after that workshop on the 1st of June, correct?
Right. I took all of the things we went through and I updated the list based on that with the color coding that we had for highly recommended, recommended, and not recommended.
Right.
So where we are is we just have, there were a number of plants that we needed a little more information on to put into that category.
Okay. All right. So we just, I think, right. So we've got a little research to do, those of us who are on that call, just to dig in and say, whether we feel that we can or cannot recommend those ones that we just didn't quite have enough information. So, I mean, I was fine with your suggestion to just kind of divide up the list and each of us take about, what it was, a dozen or 15 different plants to look at.
Yeah, and that was, if you want to participate, it's like 15 a piece. If you can't do that, then it'll be 18 a piece. So it's, either way, it's not a huge number.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm happy to help out. I learned a lot listening to the three of you on that call. So that was very helpful. So yeah, I'm happy to do that. So maybe what I'll do is send around a note just to, or actually I'll probably respond to yours about that, and we can, move that ahead. Perhaps schedule another workshop. If we need to go over those last, relatively small number of plants and assess whether they're recommended, highly recommended or not. Does that sound good?
That sounds good. And if you want, when you send around the note, we can just have, do it in order of how they appear in the spreadsheet, so that, the first
Sure.
15, somebody will do the next 15, rather than trying to, divvy it up by specific ones.
Yeah, I like the simple approach for sure. Okay, so we're moving that forward. I'm very glad to hear it. Then I had sent around a note a few days ago about Kenilworth Pond. We had gotten a note from John McKee, the roadmaster, about the pond looking, I guess, a little bit scuzzy, I think was his word. But I think the bottom line is that it does look like it's got a lot of algae growing in it. And just by way of context, we had last year, we had discussed that. So the Parks and Recreation Commission had a company that was coming in and treating that pond, I believe, every month, and charging the township. And I don't remember, Patty, you're on. Do you recall what it cost every month to have the pond treated?
I think it was about like $350 or something. It was substantial.
Yeah, I thought it was, over $300 per month to have it treated. And when we inquired a little bit about, well, what exactly are they treating it for, and are they testing the water before they decide to treat, it was, no, we don't really test. We just kind of show up and squirt the stuff in, and hey, there's no duckweed growing, so it's good, right? And so we had recommended that they stop those treatments. They did. And now I don't know if they would have done anything for controlling the algae, but that's something that certainly is happening now. And I don't, was this discussed at the recent Parks and Rec meeting, Patty?
Yeah, it was. I think originally that the pond, and this was before my time, but the pond was treated to control duckweed or something similar to that. That was basically suffocating the fish. I don't think it made a difference on the algae. I could be completely wrong with this, but that's my understanding. So if it's just, an algae bloom, that may just be a summer thing. Again, I'm not sure. I would have to go back and see why it was started, when it was started actually, and why. And like I said, that was before my tenure, so I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. And of course, Corey had gone down to the pond to look, and then wrote back. He copied everyone on his email of a little earlier today with a few, possible ways to mitigate the algae bloom that seems to be ongoing there. Has anyone else had a chance to go down there to Kenilworth Pond and have a look?
I went there yesterday.
And how did it look to you, Bill?
There was a reasonable amount of algae, and there was also a lot of vegetation. I couldn't quite tell if it was just floating or if it was rooted and growing that high.
You know what kind of vegetation? Was it water lilies or?
No, not water lilies, but I do not know what kind it was.
Okay.
A number of years ago, they treated the pond with aluminum sulfate, which is exactly what we had used on our lake. And it's very easy to apply. I don't know if the state has put regulations on that or not. But from that, we went to the grass-eating carp. And the grass-eating carp are extremely effective as long as your fishermen don't pull them out and eat them. So do they allow fishing there?
Yes, there's
Yeah,
also in there.
That pretty much precludes the grass-eating carp, but they are totally effective because our lake is just under 7 acres. We had 101 grass-eating carp come in, and we went from one summer of the algae being so thick we could almost walk across it to having almost none.
Mhm.
So, you know, they do the job, but so do the fishermen.
So long as they don't get into the waters of the Commonwealth.
Exactly.
Right, and consider how close that pond is to the Schuylkill River, which is one of the reasons that we were a little, recommended that it not be treated, because it is so close to the river.
They did do a magnificent job. We got ours from the fishery in Elverson,
Mhm.
and
Or you say that the carp he was talking about can't multiply?
Right, they
Right,
can't
they're-
reproduce.
yeah,
Yeah, the carp are sterile.
Subtract.
we were told at the time, which was around 94, that we were the first one of a lake of our size to have a license from
in
the
the
state.
state.
And
Mhm.
actually it worked pretty well. And but you know, they were still alive in the 2003 disaster when Haynes and Kibble House violated all the DEP permits in Coventry Lake Estate and damaged our lake. But they were still finding the carp more than 15 years later, which is their usual life.
Hmm. Okay, so they're very
So-
robust fish.
But
So
this-
John, I guess, sorry. I think what we need to figure out is, you know, why was treatment started in the first place? And then, you know, what is it exactly that needed control?
Mhm.
And is that in particular a problem that's occurring again now?
Right, or is this something that just happened every summer, even when it was being treated?
Right, right. Yeah, because the treatment I know did not keep the water pristine. I mean, there was still algae blooms. So again, I don't have that information. I don't know if it's in the Parks and Rec minutes somewhere.
Okay.
But those aren't online. They're in the township office. So
Right.
I don't have
Okay.
access to those.
Jayer probably would have a lot of information on that, Patty, because he was very instrumental in talking to us about grass-eating carp at the time. And I don't know why it wasn't done for the township, other than it's possible they did not pass the state questionnaires. The state, it was very adamant about there being no outlets, as well as the depth and everything. So it's possible that Kenilworth Park and whatever did not.
Right, because there is an outlet of the pond that goes into the creek that feeds right into the Schuylkill.
Okay,
So,
then they would not work then.
So I know that when it was decided that we would pause the treatment, it was sort of with the, let's see what happens.
We have an outlet too, but at least we put, trash racks and everything else there so the fish can't get out.
Mhm.
The outlet at Kenilworth looks like it's not going to survive too much longer.
At
It's
Kenilworth, yeah.
pretty bad.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's very rusted and looks like it's about to collapse. All right. Well, I will take the action item to gather a little more information on the history of those treatments, why they were started, what they were attempting to control.
I think, John, I think some of what started was that the fish were being killed down there a couple of years back, and that triggered the discussion, and then the algae, and it covered it was the pond covered over and the fish were dead. So they got an expert out there to give them an estimate and a report on what needed to be done. And that's where it initiated. And then they started the treatment, a yearly treatment. And we're approaching it as year by year. And I think that was always a discussion they would have early on in the year, whether or not they were going to do it for the upcoming year. And that was at a time really when EAC was kind of just in limbo and wasn't really part of that discussion.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know when we took this up last year, it was a little disappointing because we really couldn't get any information about, you know, what exactly were they treating with, were they testing the water before and after. It didn't really seem to be very well scientifically based, I guess I would say. It was just, hey, we made this recommendation and we've just continued doing the same thing without them being able to share with me really much information about it. So I will talk to Jay to see if I can get any more context about that, and specifically if it is the algae that they're concerned about, and if there's anything we can do that's, you know, a little more based on science and what we want, what our objectives are for that pond.
For whatever it's worth, I was at Marsh Creek this morning, and there's quite a bit of algae there also. And a lot of dead panfish, bluegills, sunnies, crappies, small.
Yeah, I mean the algae blooms are a you know, side effect from the fertilized lawns that then drain into the waterways, and then the algae has got fertilizer, so that it blooms, it expands, it takes over in some cases. And do you know, Erica or Jim, whether, for example, within Kenilworth Park, I mean, certainly for the water that flows in, we know that it is going to be carrying some lawn fertilizer, but do we fertilize or treat the grass lawn areas within Kenilworth Park?
I am not aware. I'd have to look into that. I don't think so, but I don't want to speak for if there's background that I'm not aware.
I don't think there is either.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any treatment.
Yeah, I assumed not, but I thought, you know, that's one thing that, excuse me, if we, you know, stopping the fertilizing of a lawn also will reduce an algae bloom. It won't do anything to control what's there.
And the creek comes through that farm on the opposite side of Time Street, so there might be farm runoff.
Yeah, and runoff from the neighborhood, you know, the lawns, you know, things like that for sure. Okay. So we've got a little more information to gather, and you know, this will potentially be a continuing item for us to figure out how to address this. All right. The next thing I had on the agenda had to do with a couple of Penn State Extension webinars that had been held over the past several weeks. There have been a couple, at least, that I attended. There was one about, well, there's a series ongoing on the spotted lanternfly and managing that that has actually been interesting. It's been, I think, 4 different webinars. I think there's been a lot of repetition. They probably could have done it in 2 or 3 webinars, but there is some good information there. And one of the things in particular I was looking at is when we think about controlling spotted lanternflies, obviously a lot of that has to do with controlling the tree of heaven. And the recommendations that are still coming based on the latest research are essentially the things that we have done or continue to do, and that is the utilization of trap trees kill off most of the trees, save about 10%, only save the male trees, and then treat them with a systemic insecticide. And so that really hasn't changed. Similarly for the spotted lanternfly, they know more about the plants that it prefers, but there's really nothing dramatic that has changed in terms of their recommendations for managing. That was on the spotted lanternfly. I also attended one that was really interesting that was about meadows and restoring native meadows. Mowing versus meadows and things like that. It was actually was encouraging because it was, I would say, consistent with some of our recommendations to Parks and Rec and to the roadmaster and the road crew about decreasing the amount that they're mowing, decreasing the frequency that they're mowing, and in some areas stopping mowing altogether. And that was one of the messages from this webinar, that if you have an area and you don't necessarily want to spend thousands of dollars to create a meadow, just stop mowing it and it will create its own meadow over time. Now, it does require some management, but obviously that, managing an area like that instead of mowing it as lawn actually saved municipalities a lot of money. I mean, their costs for managing a given area with no mow or low mow was was decreased by about 85%. So, and we've made those recommendations. We'll continue to make those recommendations. And I think, Hanover Meadows is another area that we'll be talking about. Now, one of the other things that kind of came up about that when they were talking about mowing and specifically in public lands is that a number of municipalities have actually moved to outsourcing not necessarily all of their mowing, but at least some of their mowing, because they found that their crews were spending, as much as 40% of their time in the summer on lawn mowers, as opposed to doing much of the other work that they need to do. And so that was something that I thought I would like us to consider, is I know from previous discussions when we've talked to John McKee about, what it costs to, mow, for example, some of the large areas like the disc golf course at Kenilworth. It's a pretty high price. I mean, on the order of $100 per hour. And that is, factoring in fuel, mowers, road crew time, salary, benefits, etc. And so I guess one question I had is, I don't know, Erica, if that's something that you would be interested in exploring, just to see if that might save the township some money, for example. I would talk about some areas that would be targeted, potentially even that where, open space maintenance funds maybe would be available to use. So some of the places in Coventry Woods, the Kenilworth Disc Golf Course, things like that. Is that something that you would be interested in looking into?
Sure, I think that's an interesting idea because it could be a win-win, in terms of maintaining the spaces, meadow and a more natural state. And then you also have can offset some of that savings and kind of redistribute work on the open space funds, doing work in other areas. So I can definitely have that conversation with John. Just thinking about areas where it would be suitable. So Kenilworth was one.
Mm-hmm.
Coventry Woods locations, perhaps. Some open space around. Okay, I'm trying to think about that. Okay.
Yeah, and I know it's been a couple of years ago, but there's a woman who was, I believe, and Patty will help me out with this, I believe was the head of the Parks Department at Reading. And they actually went to a model where they outsourced their mowing, and it was a very substantial savings for the city of Reading, just by hiring contractors to do the mowing rather than paying their own, their own folks to do that. And I know, I mean, I know that, for example, with the recent storms, one of the things that John McKee has said is that it's been very difficult for them to get out, and clear the trees that have fallen across trails and things like that. That they, they've got their hands full in the summer. It's construction season, and certainly we want them to be able to focus on what's important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Sure, I'll have that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it might be as simple as, let's find out what does it cost us to have them mow the golf course versus could we get a quote or two and say how much would it cost an outside contractor to mow that?
Okay.
Okay. All right. Then the only other thing I had on my agenda was that we have, of course, our first educational webinar tomorrow night, which Corey will be presenting. It's tomorrow night at 7. And I just wanted to, and obviously Corey's not on, he wasn't able to attend tonight, but I wanted to touch base with you, Erica, about how the Zoom meeting is going to be set up. Ideally, what I'd like to do is I would like to give an introduction. I'd like to introduce Corey. I'd like to show the flyer that you created, just to remind people that this is a series. And then introduce them to Corey and have him join. And then the other thing is, I don't know if you can set it up such that not everyone joins by video. I don't know if that's I'm not familiar enough with Zoom to know if you can disable the video function. So that, for example, you could just have, I do think it would be good to have Corey on video. I mean, I think that makes it a little more personal. But if others who join, are not on video, because I think otherwise it can get distracting. And then you have to worry about them, whether they're on mute or not and things like that.
You can set it up. You can set it up that the default is that the video is off. So as they log in, their video will be off by default. They'll still have control to turn it on and off.
Yeah. Okay. So
I think you can. I think you can do the same thing with muting them as they come in. Also, the host can then mute everybody. Will have control, and if Corey's the host, he'll be able to do that.
Well, I imagine though that Erica is probably the host because you're the one who created the meeting.
Right.
And are you going to be able to join and?
I will. Yes, I will help out with that. Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, I was thinking of the same thing about, ability to share screen and manage what's going on. And I think, and Jim knows the way that the meeting can be revised, at least for right now, you click on the same link, but I think I can go in and at least as people come in, not everybody's, instantly has their, video up or they're all muted, that kind of thing. So I can certainly do that.
Okay.
And once Corey shares his screen, then the pictures get really small. So you don't see everybody. You only see a couple of them.
That is true. Yep.
Yeah, depending on the display,
right.
You're going to have that option. Okay.
Right.
All right. Well, I was, so I figured obviously, certainly Corey and I would join the meeting early to make sure that everything seems to be working. The audio is good and whatever. So I don't know, what time do you want us to connect, Erica?
Let's see. So 7 o'clock, how about maybe 6:40 on the safe side? 6:45?
Yeah, that should be plenty of time,
Okay.
I would think.
You think? Okay.
Yeah, I would think. And then, for our subsequent webinars, we'll be more practiced and
Oh, sure. Yeah.
go very smoothly, I'm sure.
Work through it. Yeah. Good thinking though about the the host and yeah, how that will all, work out so that Corey feels, good to present.
Right. Okay. All right, well, those are the only things I had on the agenda. I will open it up to see if there are any other issues or topics we should discuss.
Meeting minutes from May.
Oh, you know what, Kim, I had trouble, I don't know why, but I was having trouble accessing the Google Drive, so I couldn't download them to send them around to everyone. So I thought, if possible, I just checked just a few minutes before this meeting, and I was able to access. I don't know what the issue was before. How about if I send those around by email, and we'll request revisions that way?
Okay, and then I'll put it in these minutes. Everybody better be reading these minutes.
When I can access the drive, I do, yes. Thank you.
Yes.
And they're permanent minutes. People will read them for generations to come. They'll always be available.
That's
Hey,
right.
John, just to follow up on the Kenilworth Pond,
Yes.
that discussion, looks like that contractor was hired back on April of 2016.
Okay.
The Parks meeting of April of 2016 was the discussion, and it looks like they had authorized the contract to start in April of that year. So
Okay.
that might be a good place to start. I see.
Yep.
I have that agenda, and that topic was on their agenda for that night.
Okay. Of the April 2016 Parks and Rec meeting?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't
Great.
know who has those meeting minutes. I assume that Parks and Rec turned them over to, I don't know if that was Lois or Winter at the time back then.
Jim, I think from what I understand is they're printed out, they're in a binder that's in the closet in the small meeting room.
That's.
But there have been
officially-
requests to somehow get them online.
they've never made it to me to get online. So, yeah, I mean, that's something we can change in the future, but,
Good. Okay.
So that's where they are. They're in the binder in the closet in the small meeting room.
all right. So at least we know where they're at, and we know what month to be looking for. So it shouldn't be too hard to follow from there. What won't be in there is, I'm sure, the guy's estimate and that kind of stuff. So I would think or hope Jay or Colleen or somebody would have those.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Okay. I'll dig into that a little bit. That's a good place to start. Thank you for that.
Yep, sure.
All right. Any other business? Well, I guess if not, then I'll look forward to, if not actually seeing you, then to at least seeing your names on a Zoom meeting tomorrow night at 7.
Some more business.
All right, can you hear me?
Oh, yep.
So Justin and I looked into prices for 6 mil plastic for laying down to solarize a large section, whether it be at Hanover Gardens, or Hanover Meadows or Kenilworth Park or wherever we're going to do it. But we were donated a seed mix that would be suitable.
Yeah, it was from Earned Seeds. So the Chester County Beekeepers Association, we're going to say in the name of the Peter Littner Memorial Save the Bees Fund, will donate a $50 1-pound bag of the butterfly and what kind of mix was it, Jesse? What was the official name of it?
Butterfly and hummingbird.
Hummingbird mix, and it'll cover 2,000 square feet if you spread it with some mixture like sand or kitty litter, and we'd like to request maybe Parks and Rec or maybe EAC could pay for the solarization tarp, and it can be reused, at different locations and stuff. But we would, we would head up laying it out, burying the edges, removing it, raking up the biomass, and the fall stowing of it, and come up with a plan for mowing or not mowing, and maybe some kind of border around it so it doesn't get mowed accidentally or something.
Mm-hmm.
But we'd love to make progress on what we've been talking about for a while, because Patty had mentioned, she wasn't sure what kind of budget there might be to help improve the area.
Mm-hmm.
And when the seed mix was offered up, we thought, I know exactly where we want to use this.
No, that's great. Wow, thank you. Were you thinking primarily of like the butterfly garden at Kenilworth Park? Because I know that's the one that I think Patty put Jesse in touch with Colleen Broom from Parks and Rec. Colleen had kind of been, in the past, had managed that little garden.
I don't think she's been communicating very well with Jess. I thought more of the need was at Hanover Meadows, in that rear section that Patty was mentioning. They wanted to, really turn into a little pollinator meadow, and we were thinking like a 24-foot by 80-foot section. If stuff isn't already getting planted there, that might be a great spot for it. But it can certainly go at Kenilworth Park if we can get some cooperation and some actually moving on this with whoever's supposedly managing it.
Yeah, I know the butterfly garden or pollinator garden at Kenilworth is much smaller than that. I mean, it's a fraction of that size. And I don't know, was that discussed at the Parks and Rec meeting, Patty? This recent one?
It was not. Colleen was not present.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I mean, I know that's something you guys have been talking about for a long time, is trying to kind of reboot that and get it going again. And there's been discussion from everything from raised beds to starting over to just giving up and turning it back into lawn, I think. But it sounds like the area that you're talking about, Justin, would be quite a bit larger than, that the current butterfly garden at Kenilworth. And I know we've talked about, you're right, we've talked about doing sort of that demonstration, demonstration garden or pollinator garden at Hanover Meadows. So I think the key would be figuring out where we could, where's the best place for that, which is obviously, I guess ultimately probably be up to the Parks and Recreation Commission.
Who would we be requesting money from to buy the 6 mil 24 by 80 some feet tarp that in theory can be used over and over to create these little areas, hopefully at least one every year in the town? Would that be something? I know EAC has a little bit of funds, but would we try to get Parks and Rec, or what's your thought?
I think we could do it a couple of different ways. I mean, certainly we could request it. Ultimately, it'll have to be approved by the Board of Supervisors. That is my understanding. Jim, would you agree with that?
How much money are we talking about?
Jesse, go ahead with the numbers.
It's $118 roughly for the 24 by 80 tarp.
And like I said, not just a one-time thing, but it's something we should be able to use that tarp over and over again until, I mean, it should last at least 2-3 years, hopefully, to create 2 or 3 different little pollinator areas at different parts in the township. It would be what I would like to see happen. Turning into Porky Pig over here.
Erica, I don't know that that's a board issue.
No, we can handle that administratively. So if there's a recommendation, and if I'm in the loop on that, and there's a recommendation to do it gets approved by the committees, I can always, check on the budget, that kind of thing. But those types of expenses, I can review that.
Okay. Yeah.
Justin?
Go ahead. Who's saying your name? Is that Patty?
Yes, it's Pat.
Pat.
Do you need an area that has been mowed or not mowed for this spring?
Well, this would be super low. Jess, go ahead with the steps while I'm getting stung here.
Um,
So the first step would be to mow it as low as you could, and then you solarize it with the 6 mil plastic.
Mm-hmm.
Leave it on for approximately a month. Uncover it, rake away the debris, and leave it uncovered for approximately 2 weeks to let any weed seeds in the soil germinate. Then you cover it back up for about another month, and then in the fall, so you uncover it in September, at the end of September or beginning of October, and then you seed it and you let it go over winter, because most of those seeds need to have
My flashlight, my headlamp.
an over winter cycle. And then in the spring, you watch for the weed seeds that should only be annual things. You will mow it about every 6 weeks-ish when the weeds are about a foot tall, but you're knocking down the weeds essentially and allowing the perennials to establish and grow. So it is a process, and it isn't necessarily pretty right away, but I think that if we are using it as a demonstration area, and maybe we have simple signage for each step of the way, people will understand the process and maybe kind of grow through it with us.
Okay, because if you wanted to have like an experimental area to work on, we have an area that you would be able to do that. 24 by 80 or 180 or whatever. It's an area partially that I had mowed this spring, and I have some lovely milkweed coming up in it now in an area. But if it's something that you can use either partially or entire, you're welcome to take a look at it and see what you think.
Thank you.
I'm pretty confident the method will work. We've done our research. We've looked at several Xerces publications. I know the CCBA won't want the donation to go to private land. They want part of the purpose of the fund is to bring pollinator awareness to the public in public spaces and try to have them mimic the techniques, in their own, on their own land.
I have a couple comments for Justin and Jesse. First of all, if the EAC and we're doing so much of the work, you and Jesse and the rest of the EAC, not that I know that much about it, but I think we should have some say in which parks we do it in, and where you want to do this trial. So we should take it before Parks and Rec and say, hey, how about, we pick a park and then we ask them if it's okay. And I also wanted to know where the free seeds were from. And then I had one more question.
So the free seeds are sourced from Ernst. They're donated to us by the CCBA Save the Bees Fund.
CCBA. And what's Earth? EA?
Ernst Seeds, ERNST.
Okay. And my last question, Justin, are you playing with the bees while we're on this call?
I am in a beehive, yes, with one of my apprentices. Are they loud?
No, it's just
no, we can hear them occasionally. Okay, no, I think that sounds great. I mean, what I guess I would I mean, I'm certainly in favor of doing that. We've talked about this in concept. I think what you guys are now talking about is having a more concrete plan to actually make it happen. So I'm all for it. I would love to see us go forward with that. It sounds like we have a way forward in terms of getting the plastic, purchasing the plastic to use to begin the process. You've already sourced the seeds. I think the next step, it would seem to me, would be to have a really clear, probably written plan, and to share that with Parks and Rec, as well as with where do we want that to be? You know, where would we propose to do this? I mean, you know, a lot of us have been focusing on Hanover Meadows just because it's a big, wide open area. It's brand new. There is a walking trail that I believe gets a fair amount of traffic, so it would be a good spot for, you know, people. A lot of people will walk by and will see that, and therefore the opportunity to educate the public, I think, is very clear. But it's certainly worth considering, are there other places where we would want to do that?
Oh, sure. I fully agree with that. You know, as a board, we should, you know, come to a consensus of where it should happen. But I remember your wife, you know, approaching us directly, wanting something to happen at the new New Hanover Meadows. So that doesn't have to be the option. That was just what I was basing my location on, not necessarily like someone's residence. But you know, like we should really start the solarization ASAP, because we actually just started ours. We put our tarp out this last week, and you know, it needs to go through a couple of those cycles.
Right.
So, I mean, are we talking about something we're going to do next year, or is this a possibility this year? Because, like you said, we've been talking about it for a couple of years now.
I don't know why we couldn't do it this year. I mean, I think we just need to identify as quickly as possible exactly where we would want to do it. And if it's on parkland, then we need to get the buy-in of the Parks and Rec Commission. I don't know, Patty, do you have any comments on, you know, whether it's realistic to think we could begin this?
I think that, like what Justin said, yes, time is of the essence based on the schedule that Jesse outlined. And this has been discussed for quite a while. We actually have a kiosk purchased and installed at Hanover Meadows specifically to educate on Meadows. So I can't imagine that there would be any dissent. That's the Park and Rec goal, is to have a meadow demonstration area there. So with the wildflowers and the, it sounds perfect. But to Kim's point, there are also, you know, other areas that could be utilized, but maybe in the future, as Justin and Jesse said, if this tarp can be reused, then, you know, we can plan ahead for other locations that might be viable.
Right. Yeah, that sounds great.
But I would absolutely encourage, if we can get that going, let's get it going. I'd be more than happy to help and facilitate this in any way I can.
Yeah, as would I.
So I can essentially write out a plan for the mowing for the prep schedule, including the mowing and the signage that would happen at each of those steps. That way, whoever needs to present that to get approval from Parks and Rec, and then they can just tell us where they want it.
Yeah, I think it's, and I wanted to bring this up before you signed off. I wanted to officially thank Phoebe for her work on the little garden underneath the Hanover Meadows entrance sign. So that was an example of something that happened, you know, just communication between the EAC, Parks and Rec, some online or email voting to move things forward. And Phoebe, it's great. Thank you so much for taking care of that. And I hope that this could be something else that, if you can get a plan pretty quickly, the Parks and Rec can review it via email. And, certainly if there aren't any complications or concerns, it's kind of a no-brainer. And maybe we wouldn't have to wait until the next official meeting. I don't know. That's
right. Well, I certainly hope that we wouldn't have to, but
because then I don't know that you're going to get it done this year.
right. Right.
Well, and
Okay.
when I was out at Hanover Meadows planting the flowers, I had several people come and stop me and say that they come and use the walking trails and that how much they really like it. And so I think that would be a wonderful place to have it, because there's a lot of people there who are very interested in what's going on. And they like the kiosk and they're interested in what kind of things are coming next. So just from what I saw, that would be great.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, so it sounds like that's perfect, Jesse. You can write up a brief. It doesn't have to be, a long, super detailed description. I think just your proposal, the stages that, you'd also even have the educational signage to accompany the different stages. And I think we'll need to talk with Parks and Rec and talk perhaps also with John McKee. I'd want to include him in the conversation, since he is obviously taking care of that whole, well, of all the grounds, but is right there every day as well. Just to make sure that we've got it in a place where, we've got the signage, we've got where people will see it, and where, our road crew is very clear on what they need to do and then not do to help us manage that.
Great, sounds good. I'll work on it and hopefully get it to you in the next couple days. And then
that would be
disperse
fantastic.
it wherever it needs to be.
Yep, that sounds fantastic. Thank you very much for that proposal.
Thanks,
and for
Jesse.
doing the research and getting the seeds. That should be great. All right. Any other business?
One more question. Did I actually send that email where my neighbor's daughter did a little presentation for school about pollinators and not having a full yard? Did I send that link for everybody to review and get their thoughts on?
You did send that, yeah, maybe a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. Did anybody see that? What are your thoughts? I didn't know if we could, I don't know. I'm not necessarily like put it on the township website or possibly the Facebook page, or I don't know. It seemed like a really cool thing she did, and I'm not saying it could be incorporated in our webinar series, but I thought it was a great little presentation by, what was she, 4th grade, Jesse? Jesse, you there?
Yeah, I think 4th grade.
Did anybody view that link? Did the link work?
Yeah, it did. It's funny. I'm just so not into Facebook. I didn't really think of that, but yeah, we should absolutely link it on Facebook.
Because her dad said if we need to, if they want to use it, first he asked her permission if she was okay with it, make sure she wasn't too shy or anything like that. That he could get us a better file, a better MP4 file rather than that link.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, or if they can. I'm trying to remember. Was that on YouTube? Where was the? I don't remember where the link went. It's been a couple of weeks since I looked at it.
I think it was on maybe even some kind of like school type of website that the kids uploaded their videos to.
Mm-hmm.
Too much. It wasn't on like a major platform.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would think that a good option would be to, if they can get it uploaded to YouTube, and then we could put a link to that on the website. That would be a good way to get additional looks at it.
Okay, that sounds great. And then one more question I wanted to ask was, I sent that email about the neighbor spraying herbicides on our property. do I remember correctly that we had a conversation of something like that happening to one of our residents? And, you know, if that was legal or not legal, is my memory not serving me correct about something like that happening in our township somewhat fairly recently?
I don't remember herbicide spraying. No.
Jim, do you have any comment on that? If like the scenario is our left side fence, we have a chicken coop right near, and we extended the chicken run. So basically they have from their normal run over to the fence, and our neighbors that recently moved in surveyed the property, and there's an arc. So our fence goes straight, but our property actually arcs out a little bit, at, you know, 4 or 5 feet in a curve. So on the other side of the fence, we recently saw these survey stakes. So that was interesting. And you know, he was mowing, whatever, but then he applied herbicides to the fence bottom. We haven't talked to them yet. We haven't even met them yet because of the COVID situation. But they're basically spraying poisons on our property, and right at where our chickens are eating grass and flowers on the other side of the fence. Jim, do you have any reference offhand? If you know, that sounds like an illegal thing to me, but have you seen this issue happen before with people spraying plants, you know, killing vegetation on other people's property?
I'm not familiar with it happening. I'm sure that it has, but I don't remember it coming before, coming to the township, or certainly it hasn't come before the board.
Yeah. If you like, I can weigh in a little bit.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, sure. And look at the situation. I know that certainly for spraying of right-of-ways by utility companies, there's issues that are, the jurisdiction is a DEP. And I talked with our zoning officer about this briefly, and he mentioned the same thing. We don't have anything in our ordinances regarding this type of issue specifically, but I know it's becoming more of an issue, certainly with environmental concerns, health and safety, that kind of thing. But, you know, it's a civil issue of someone encroaching on a property, your property, and that would be something you would have to manage. But there may be resources through DEP available to try and at least bring some clarity to the issue. But I saw that you had included Corey, and I thought that was a good idea from the county's perspective too. If they had resources pointed to the, you know, the proper authority on this, because I think that as a township we need to know about this as well, as for, you know, private property owners. But apart from that, I don't have anything direct. I was hoping maybe Corey could weigh in. I'd be interested in what he would have to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was my question, Erica, was whether the township had any sort of ordinances that would apply in this case. It doesn't sound like so.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a little sad, because another thing we were thinking about, just uphill from us, there's this one neighbor who's always out on his lawn deer tractor, and he has these 2 big spraying tanks, and I'm pretty positive we can smell Roundup from 4 houses away. We have well water. We know we're downhill. To me, that seems like something that could be addressed. I don't know. It's probably not an ordinance either, but why do we have to worry about people using chemicals and then our drinking water? I don't know. It's just one of those issues that I'm sure most of us are very anti-chemical, and I'm not sure how many of us are on well water, but I'm sure some people have the same concerns.
Yeah, that definitely, I mean, when it comes to that sort of thing, I would think that would be a DEP issue. I mean, that's where I would start. Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection.
I would agree. I mean, I'd be happy to provide District 6 as the office, the regional office that I coordinate with on, you know, different issues and that kind of thing. But it's definitely difficult property to property with, you know, everything that came out about Roundup. I absolutely sympathize with those issues for certain. I mean, it's something I think municipalities are looking at, but until there's some good guidance, we're going to look to DEP for that.
Yeah, makes sense. Is that helpful, Justin?
Yeah, I just, before we talk to the neighbors, I just wanted to kind of have a, like, I know what our lighting ordinance is. So I can go to my one neighbor and say, listen, your floodlights, again, you readjusted them, you put brighter lights on. I just am not going to tolerate looking at floodlights out my window. Anytime I walk out the front of my house, it's not allowed. Your light is not allowed to leave your property. You have to put some kind of reflector on or shield, because you are breaking the law. So I know the 377.74 ordinance, whatever the number is, and I will print it out and hand it to him. But when it comes to this neighbor, I need to have a chat with him. I don't know how to say, well, listen, it's just not a matter of me liking it and you not caring. You're not allowed to do this. You are not allowed to apply chemicals on my property, because Jim said last meeting, we don't really have any ordinances about your grass needs to be mowed to a certain height, or you could be fined, or anything like that. So I wanted to have some kind of backup, like, no, you can't do this for XYZ reason.
Mm-hmm.
We do have an ordinance for grass cutting. It's like 10 inches. It can't exceed 10 inches or something like that. We send Ron Comtwaits after him if it exceeds that. So if you have that problem, we can help you out with it.
Wait, so people can't have a meadow in their property, or does it have to be so close to the road?
There's setback lines, yeah,
from the property borders.
right.
And what specifically should I search up to review those ordinances on the webpage? What keywords might help me find those?
Property maintenance.
Property maintenance, yeah, that makes sense.
Erica, do you know of any townships around that have such ordinances that would be against the spraying, or specifically encroachment on well water?
I've been looking at this. I had similar questions and concerns about this. I don't know if the city of Lancaster was looking at something. That was the last place that I was looking at, that they were at least reviewing some sort of legislation that they could pass, that they could at least monitor and enforce some of these things. But I think I don't think that got formalized. But that was the last one I was looking at. But I have not seen any. There's no model language out there yet.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question.
It would be premature then for the Planning Commission to consider something like that?
If there was an example, I think it would be much easier to work through, but I don't have anything. I keep my eye out though for that.
Okay.
Yeah, those policies and new legislation that might come through about this subject, because this is, this is relevant.
It's a growing concern.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
Along that line, setbacks, just, I don't want to start a half-hour conversation, but just real briefly, why would there be a 10-inch minimum around property borders, on the thinking of, if we want more homeowners to reduce their lawn size, have more, a little bit wild areas for pollinators and other wildlife and birds and things like that, brush piles for native bees and bumbles. Setbacks like that, the borders of properties are where people can really shrink their lawn, and where they're wasting so much noise pollution, air pollution, ground pollution with chemicals, maintaining the property. What's necessarily the thinking behind these setbacks on property borders, and why it has to be so low?
But I think it's specific to zoning ordinances, the zoning areas and the size of the land, and I think it's different in different parts of the township. I'd have to look at the ordinance, but that's my recollection of it. Like you couldn't put a meadow in my neighborhood. I'm in a residential, right? Single family. If my neighbors let their grass grow to 3 feet, that's a problem. But if you're out in the west and you have a meadow, that's a different situation. So I think you got to look at the zoning district that it's in and then
Yeah, I
dig
would
into the
agree.
ordinance.
I think it's context, aesthetic, plan development, that kind of thing. Those characteristics are baked into the zoning ordinance and the property maintenance code to manage that from that aspect. But I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that need to change. Like you said, aesthetics, what we view as beautiful. Like a useless green lawn provides nothing for nature. So if these some of the conspiracy theory lines of thinking, and there's truth to it to some degree, is that the chemical industries are half running the USDA. That's why we rely on chemical farming, not regenerative farming. And it also even goes down to the HOA level, where this aesthetic, this for looks only type of value system we've somehow been brainwashed into adopting has us maintaining property that doesn't need to be maintained, and it benefits chemical companies, it benefits the lawn service companies, the people who chop down trees, who make money off of the destruction and not the stewardship of the land. So somewhere down the line, I'd like to see these things change. It's not going to change right here and now, but I just wanted to share my viewpoint when things like that, what we think of as beautiful, is the base system of that value system is really been skewed and force fed to us, that we think our outside areas should look like golf courses, our lawns should be outside carpet. So I'm off my soapbox now.
Justin, chapter 124 of the ordinances, you'll see brush, grass, and weeds, and you can read that and it'll tell you everything.
Thanks. I'll check it out.
Yep.
Thanks, Jim. All right. Any other items for discussion? Well, if not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I motion that.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for joining the call tonight. I really appreciate it. And obviously, we've got a few action items that will be reflected in the minutes, and we'll be in touch.